My boss left me in a country where I didn't speak the language. No passport, no wallet, no way back, because he thought I wouldn't survive the week. I'm not proud of how long I kept quiet about him. Charismatic people make you doubt your eyes. They tell a story so smooth, you forget your own. So here's mine, without polish. I'm a 34-year-old operations manager, good at checklists, bad at self-promotion. He's a VP with perfect teeth and a talent for just asking questions that sound like accusations. We were sent to a mid-sized manufacturing client in Cluj, Romania, for a process audit. Not Paris. No postcard skyline. A place where your phone autocorrects street names into nonsense and every sign looks like a test you didn't study for. The first red flag was so polite, I missed it. At the departure gate, he tapped my shoulder, grin easy and managerial. I'll carry both passports through immigration, faster for check-in. You juggle the expense cards. He had a lanyard full of elite statuses that opened velvet ropes. I handed him my passport the way you hand over a stapler in a meeting. I didn't like it. I did it anyway. We flew overnight and landed brittle. He breezed us through the fast lane like he owned the airport. At the hotel, he did the talking. One night, on one folio, he told the receptionist, sliding both passports across the marble. Company rate, he turned to me. We'll split tomorrow once they extend the reservation. It sounded sensible at 8:45 a.m., when your brain is coffee-shaped and empty. The client meetings were fine at first. Factory tour, coffee that tasted like asphalt, a conference room that smelled faintly of printer toner and lemon cleaner. He joked in that way that makes everyone in the room want to like him. I took notes. We synced on deliverables. We were meant to be there 4 days. By 7 p.m., jet lag was doing long division on my skull. I told him I was heading back to the hotel to compile our notes. He said he'd shake hands with procurement and join later. I walked the 10 minutes through air that felt like a damp coat and rode the elevator up, already composing an email in my head. My keycard didn't work. I tried again, slower, like manners would change the chip. Red light. I went back down. The receptionist peered at her screen, then at me. Your room is canceled? She made it a question, as if I might have canceled it without telling myself. I laughed once, short and wrong. There must be a mistake. My colleague checked us in. She printed something and slid it toward me with 2 hands, like it weighed more than paper. A new folio. I recognized my name, then a void under method of payment. The system showed declined. The corporate card in my wallet would fix it. I reached for it. It wasn't there. I turned my bag inside out at the counter, a show I'd never rehearsed. Passport slot empty. Card sleeve empty. The receptionist waited with a fixed smile people wear when they want to help but aren't allowed to. Maybe your friend? She offered. I called him. No answer. I texted, delivered, no dots. I checked my email to stall my panic and saw the subject line before the sender. Notice of suspension pending investigation. HR. The body was clinical. Effective immediately, your corporate access is suspended due to irregularities in travel expenditures associated with vendor Elma Consulting. Do not attempt to use corporate accounts. A meeting will be scheduled. There was an attachment, a screenshot of an expense queue with my ID on it, and charges I hadn't filed yet. My stomach did a hard reset. Sir, the receptionist said gently, we need a form of payment for even 1 night. I counted the cash in my pocket like I was counting something else. 380 lei, whatever that meant, against a rate printed in bold. Enough for 1 night, if they looked away from the minibar. She made the exception look like a favor. I took the keycard up to a room that was suddenly a place to plan a survival instead of a place to sleep. I called our travel desk. The number forwarded to a cheerful hold music that dismantled my nerves. I called HR. Voicemail. I called our CFO's assistant. She answered with guarded warmth, then cooled when I said my name. You need to speak with HR. I told her HR had suspended my access on a Friday night, 6 time zones away. Silence. I'll flag it, she said, and hung up in a hurry that felt rehearsed. At 10:13 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown. Zoom link. I joined to a black square labeled Operations Leadership. His face flickered into view. "Where are you?" he asked, tone already annoyed. I told him. He sighed. "We have a problem. Your card's been used on invoices that don't exist." "Elma Consulting? That's you, right?" He sounded disappointed, like a dad in a sitcom. "That vendor isn't mine," I said, "and my card is missing. You took my passport at check-in." "Don't be dramatic," he said. I handed it back. "Then send me a picture of it in your hand," I said before I thought about the words. He smiled without showing teeth. "I'm not your assistant." Then he softened his voice like a therapist. "Look, disappear for the weekend. I'll smooth it out with HR Monday. Don't make this bigger than it is." The screen went black. I sat there listening to the air. Then I opened the hotel safe, because grief makes you check the wrong places, and closed it on nothing. I went back downstairs and asked the night clerk if there were cameras facing reception. He frowned, then nodded. "We keep 7 days. Why?" "Because I'm stupid," I said, and he surprised me by saying, "Sometimes we are tired." I slept 2 hours diagonally on top of the covers. At 6 a.m., I walked to the police station because the consulate website told me to. The officer at the desk spoke English in careful steps. He filled a form with a pen that had chewed plastic at the tip and typed my name into a system that blinked like a slow cursor. "Passport lost or stolen?" he asked. I said stolen and heard the way it sounded like a wish. He checked a box. He stamped the paper. The stamp was heavy and absolute. The consulate took me in like a courthouse takes in weather. Metal detector, bulletproof glass. A woman with calm eyes asked me the dates 3 times and watched if I lied. I didn't. "Emergency travel document will take 2 to 3 business days," she said. "You will need proof of identity. Do you have a copy of your passport?" My voice did something small. "It was in the passport." "Any scans in your email?" I found one, a PDF from a visa application last year, and slid it under the glass. She nodded like I'd handed her a life preserver. "We will call you." I left with a paper number and a feeling that numbers were useless. I had 1 paid-for night left and a message from HR scheduling a fact-finding call the following Wednesday. My work laptop still logged me into calendar but not email. I borrowed the computer in the hotel business center and printed every scrap I could. The hotel folio with canceled, the police report, my boarding passes, the client visitor badge receipt they'd emailed to me at check-in, the taxi receipts from the airport with identical timestamps to the charges in that HR screenshot. I took a picture of the hotel front desk from 3 angles until the night guard shooed me away. Then I went to the lobby and asked to pay for CCTV footage. "We do not sell," the manager said. I nodded, waited, and said I would leave a written request and pay for the data export labor. He stared at me like I'd used a key he didn't know was there. "We can provide a copy of the police request," he said finally, cautious. "They will," I said. "They already have a case number." I wrote the number on a napkin because their printer had jammed, and my hands were shaking. At noon, my corporate cell phone went dead with a little chirp that sounded like a door closing. The front desk called to say the folio had been transferred off my name. "Your colleague came by to settle," the clerk said. "He looked for you." He had come back. He had asked for me. He had left nothing. I stood on the sidewalk and watched a bus exhale a cloud that smelled like pennies. I thought about calling my father, then didn't. He would hear the wrong parts and go buy a plane ticket he couldn't afford. I thought about marching to the factory and telling the client everything. I thought about the Zoom smile that didn't touch his eyes. Back in the room, I spread my printouts across the desk and made a map. Arrival time, card authorizations I could still see in my expense queue before the lockout, meeting schedule, the short walk to the hotel, the call log, the blank where my passport should be. Somewhere between the check-in and the cancellation was the moment he pocketed my life and sent an email about irregularities. I drew a square around the lobby cameras. I wrote down the name on the manager's tag. I wrote the case number again with slow, ugly pen strokes. Then I stopped asking anyone to fix it for me. If I was going to get home, I needed more than pity and a stamp. I needed proof arranged in a way no one could unsee. So I made a list that didn't require anyone's kindness. Consulate appointment, police addendum with suspect known, notarized statement at a local law office I found by walking until the directory names matched the brass plates, and a request to the client's compliance officer for a 10-minute call to clarify scope. I paid for the notary in cash and asked for 2 copies. The clerk stapled them with a care that felt like respect. When I left the office, a wind came down the street and flipped my collar up like a stage cue. I put my hand over the pocket with the papers and kept walking, head down, counting the steps to the hotel door without looking up. I learned something strange about hunger that week. It isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, methodical, the way a machine slows but doesn't stop. On the second morning, I realized I hadn't eaten in almost 20 hours. The hotel had extended my stay only because I left a deposit in cash and a copy of the police report. They called it a goodwill exception. I called it mercy. Breakfast was a small loaf of bread from the kiosk near the tram stop. The man there didn't speak English, but when I pointed to the bread and held up a coin, he nodded like we'd made a deal between equals. That small nod did something for me. Dignity comes in strange currencies. I spent the morning at an internet cafe 2 blocks away. The kind that still smells like toner and stale cigarettes. For €4 an hour, I had access to a browser, a scanner, and a printer that moaned every time it worked. I scanned everything. Receipts, the hotel folio, the police report, even the handwritten napkin with the case number. I uploaded all of it to a private drive. My laptop had lost access to corporate systems, but my personal email was still alive. I wrote a new message, subject line, documentation of events, for record. I sent it to myself, to my father's address, and to a free legal clinic in Bucharest. I found through an embassy resource page. I attached everything. Digital breadcrumbs are only useful if someone else can see them. That afternoon, I went back to the police station. I'd learned the rhythm of their bureaucracy. First the wait, then the look, then the stamp. I asked the same officer to add a note to my report. Suspect known. Employer, name withheld. Possession of victim's passport. He raised an eyebrow, but stamped it. Good, he said softly. Now it exists. At night, I sat in the hotel lobby near the radiator, charging my dying phone. I could see my reflection in the brass trim of the elevator doors. Unshaved, eyes hollow, but sharper now. Fear had burned off, leaving focus. The night clerk, the same one who'd helped me before, slid a folded envelope across the counter. Inside, a USB drive. Manager said delete after 7 days, he whispered. Better you keep. I tried to pay him, he shook his head. You pay already, he said, tapping his chest. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but it was enough. Timestamp. 0946 a.m., the day of check-in. My boss standing at the front desk, leaning on the counter, sliding both passports forward. The clerk printed something, pointed at the screen. My boss nodded, took both documents, and slipped them into his jacket pocket. There was no footage of him giving them back. I froze the frame, took a photo with my phone, and backed up the video twice. 1 copy online, 1 on the USB taped under the inside of my shoe. That night, I ate instant noodles from a vending machine and made a plan. Day 3. I found a local lawyer. The embassy gave me a list of English-speaking firms. Most didn't answer. One did. Her name was Ioana Popescu. Mid-30s, sharp black suit, and hair tied in a knot so tight it looked aerodynamic. Her office smelled of old paper and eucalyptus. She listened while I told her everything, slowly, like untying knots. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "We can notarize a sworn statement. You keep originals. I keep a copy in our archive. If your company disputes your version, we have a time-stamped legal record. That makes it real. She charged the equivalent of $60. I paid in cash. You have proof of your employment? She asked. I showed her my company badge and an old pay stub from my email. She scanned them, stapled my statement, and handed me a second stamped document. You have witnesses? She said. Only cameras. Sometimes that's better, she replied. By the afternoon, the consulate called. My emergency passport would be ready the next morning. I walked the length of the boulevard twice just to feel like I was moving towards something. The sky had cleared for the first time since I arrived, and the sunlight off the tram wires made the air look metallic. I still had the fact-finding call scheduled with HR. I needed to survive until then. Not hide, not plead. Survive like a file that refuses to be deleted. The Zoom call opened with 3 faces. Marla from HR, the VP, and someone new, a compliance officer I'd never met. Marla started with corporate warmth. We're conducting an internal review regarding misuse of travel funds. You're not under criminal investigation at this stage. At this stage, the VP leaned back, all casual authority. Look, I know you're embarrassed. Just tell them what happened so we can clean this up. No need for drama. I said nothing for a beat. Then, before we start, I need confirmation this call is recorded. Marla blinked. It is. Good, I said. Then I want this on record. I have video evidence showing you, sir. I turned to the VP. Pocketing both passports at hotel reception. Timestamp matches the charges on Elma Consulting. You attributed to my account. I've also filed a theft report and a notarized statement under legal counsel. The silence was thick enough to taste. Marla's mouth opened, then closed. The compliance officer spoke next. You have this evidence? Yes, and I'll provide it to corporate counsel once my travel document is issued. The VP's smile didn't reach his eyes. You're bluffing. Maybe, I said, but you'll find out before Monday. I ended the call myself. 5 minutes later, HR emailed, asking for full cooperation and temporary confidentiality. I replied with the police case number and Ioana's contact information. No apologies, no threats, just facts lined up like chess pieces. Makat. On my last night abroad, I packed the few things I had left. 1 shirt, 2 printed folders, the notarized statement, and the USB drive. I left a tip for the night clerk. All the local currency I had left, folded under a coffee cup. When I checked out, the manager shook my hand. We see many business travelers, he said carefully, but not many fight like lawyers. I laughed once. I'm just tired, he smiled. Tired is good. Angry people make mistakes. Tired people plan. At the airport, the emergency passport looked nothing like the real one. A pale blue paper cover, photo stapled inside. It didn't matter. The border officer flipped through it, compared it to my ID copy, and stamped it. That sound, the blunt slam of ink into paper, was the loudest mercy I'd ever heard. I boarded the flight 2 hours before my boss's plane was due to land for his next meeting. He didn't know I was coming home early. He didn't know I'd copied the evidence. He didn't know the hotel staff, the police, and a Romanian lawyer now held his name on official record. As the plane lifted off, I watched the ground drop away and thought about what Ioana had said before I left. Truth is not enough. You must arrive before the lie becomes permanent. I was done waiting for permission to defend myself. When I landed back home, I wasn't scared anymore. I was armed, not with anger, but with proof. And the moment I walked into that office, he would see what survival looked like when you tried to bury the wrong man. When I landed, the air smelled like home but felt different. Heavier, cleaner, like everything in it had consequence. I didn't go straight to the office. Not yet. I needed to prepare the battlefield before stepping into it. My apartment looked smaller than I remembered, and emptier. Dust had gathered like an audience waiting for the next act. I locked the door, sat at my desk, and opened the folders. Police report, notarized statement, USB drive, copies printed in both English and Romanian. My hands stopped shaking when I lined them up in order, Control is a physical thing. Sometimes you can build it out of paper. The company laptop still wouldn't connect to the corporate network, but local files worked fine. I searched through cached expense reports and found what I'd expected. Invoices for Elma Consulting, dated the week before our trip, marked submitted by J. Hart, me. But I never made them. The attached PDFs all came from a private Gmail address, embedded as screenshots. Whoever sent them knew exactly how our system tagged files, enough to make it look real. I remembered the VP's voice on that call, calm, annoyed, certain. You're bluffing. I smiled. I wasn't. By Monday morning, I had 3 allies. 1. Ioana, the lawyer in Romania. She agreed to answer any email from corporate counsel confirming my sworn statement's authenticity. 2. The hotel manager who sent me a certified copy of the CCTV footage with the hotel's seal on it. 3. The night clerk who wrote a short letter in English confirming I'd reported my passport stolen before checkout. The rest I'd billed myself. I walked into headquarters like a ghost that forgot to stay dead. The receptionist startled, then smiled too quickly. "Oh, Mr. Hart. They said you were still abroad." "Guess I made good time," I said. HR had scheduled an in-person review for Wednesday. Perfect. 2 days to arrange my counterattack. First, I visited Nadia, a finance analyst I trusted. Quiet, meticulous, allergic to office gossip. She blinked when she saw me. "I thought they suspended you." "They did, but I'm here to fix what they broke." I told her the bare minimum, then showed her one of the fake invoices. She frowned. "These signatures are scanned. Look." She zoomed in. The pixelation was obvious. "Someone copied your initials from an old vendor approval. Can you trace who uploaded them?" She hesitated. "If I had system access, maybe. But they locked your ID." "What about version logs?" She sighed. "I'll see what I can do." Quietly. By afternoon, she had something. A metadata trail. The invoices were uploaded from a device registered to the VP's executive assistant. 3 hours before our flight. That was enough to light the fuse. On Tuesday, I set the stage. I emailed HR, requesting that legal and finance be present for the Wednesday review to ensure full transparency. I copied the CFO and the client compliance officer from Romania. The compliance officer responded within 10 minutes. "Happy to attend as observer. Please include me on the meeting link." That single sentence was my insurance policy. Then I went home and rehearsed. Not lines, timing. I practiced opening folders, pressing play on the video, sliding each document forward like evidence in a courtroom. Everything had to be clean, unshakable. At midnight, I got a text from an unknown number. "You think you're clever. Don't destroy your career over a misunderstanding." No signature, but I knew the rhythm of his threats. I didn't reply. I screenshot it, saved it as Exhibit 9, and went to bed. Wednesday, conference room 4B. Long table, 12 chairs, air conditioning turned up too cold, standard intimidation tactic. The VP sat at the far end, looking bored, checking his watch. Marla from HR smiled the way people do when they're about to bury you politely. The CFO looked uneasy, and legal was already opening a laptop. I walked in carrying a plain brown envelope. "Mr. Hart," Marla began, "thank you for joining us. We'd like to clear up some discrepancies," I interrupted gently. "Before we start, the call link you sent. Did you admit our compliance officer from Cludge?" She blinked. "Yes, she's muted." "Good," I said, taking my seat. "Then let's make this simple." I laid the envelope on the table. Inside is a notarized statement, a police report, and a certified video from the hotel in Romania. Before you accuse me of theft, you should see who actually took my passport. I slid the USB across. "Play it." The screen flickered. There he was, the VP, clear as day, leaning on the counter, both passports visible. He slipped them into his jacket pocket, smiled, turned away. Timestamp, 09:46 a.m. The room went still. The CFO leaned forward. "Is that you, Daniel?" The VP laughed once, forced. That could be anyone. Anyone wearing your company ID? I asked quietly. Legal paused the video. This needs to be authenticated. It already is, I said, sliding over the hotel's signed certification. And this, I pushed the stamped police report, lists him as the only known suspect. Case numbers on the page. The compliance officer unmuted, voice calm and precise. For corporate record, we have verified this incident with local authorities. There is an active investigation regarding theft and falsified invoices. We recommend immediate suspension of Mr. Daniels' access pending audit. The sound that followed wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no confessions. Just the quiet of a man realizing his empire had cracked. The CFO cleared his throat. Effective immediately, Daniel. We'll need your badge. HR froze. Legal typed notes furiously. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched him unclip the badge, place it on the table, and push back from the chair. He stood up, but before he could leave, I added softly, "Oh, one more thing. The assistant who uploaded those invoices? The metadata shows her device ID. She might want to prepare a statement before the auditor's call." He stopped in the doorway. For the first time, he looked at me. Really looked, and saw someone he couldn't manipulate. Then he left, without a word. The CFO turned to me. "You'll be reinstated pending final review. We owe you an apology." I said nothing. Paper makes apologies unnecessary. When the room emptied, the compliance officer stayed on the line. "You handled this well," she said. "Not yet," I replied. "He still thinks this ends with HR. What else do you plan?" "Closure," I said simply. "The kind you can't appeal." That evening, I walked out of the building into the amber dusk. The air was heavy with rain, and the glass towers around me caught the last light like molten metal. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt calm, the kind of calm that comes right before the last strike. Tomorrow, the story would break wide open. I still had the final move left, and when it landed, he'd finally understand what it feels like to be stranded, with no way back. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Not from nerves, but from habit. When you've been hunted, your body doesn't let you sleep in safety until the hunt is over. Today, it would be. My phone buzzed at 6:02 a.m. It was Nadia, the finance analyst. "He's trying to pull something." Ait flagged a login from his account last night. Remote access attempt. Looks like he tried to delete the invoice history. "Can they recover it?" I asked. "Already did. It's backing up everything for legal. They're angry, but not at you." I thanked her. "Today's the audit review. Be in the loop." She hesitated. "You're really going for it?" I didn't come this far to stop at suspended pending apology. At 9 sharp, I walked back into headquarters, carrying one small item under my arm. A sealed envelope marked 2, Corporate Legal Counsel. Confidential. It wasn't symbolic. It was ammunition. The building hummed with rumors. By now, everyone knew the VP had been escorted out yesterday. What they didn't know was that I'd asked the compliance officer to authorize an independent forensic audit of all travel expenses from the last 2 years. My proof had opened the door. Now I would make sure it stayed open long enough for sunlight to get in. Inside the legal boardroom sat the CFO, 2 auditors from the external firm, and the HR director. They greeted me cautiously, like someone defusing a bomb. "Mr. Hart," the CFO said, "before we begin, I want to personally acknowledge the mistake made in how your case was handled. You were targeted." "I know," I said. "That's why I came prepared." I placed the envelope on the table. Inside, you'll find an index of 48 travel expense files, all with identical falsified vendor patterns. Each was submitted under other employees' names, then rerouted to an offshore account. The same pattern as mine. The account traces back to a shell company registered under Daniel's brother-in-law. The CFO's pen stopped midair. The HR director's face turned paper white. The auditors began typing furiously. I continued, voice steady. The metadata came from our own systems. Nadia helped me retrieve it before IT locked the server. Everything is time-stamped. You'll find one particular file labeled Singapore Trip.pdf. That's the same signature cut and paste Daniel used on my documents. The CFO leaned back slowly. You understand, this could lead to prosecution. Good, I said. Let it. He nodded once. We'll convene an emergency board meeting. Legal will contact you for a statement. I stood. Make sure the staff in Romania get credit for protecting corporate assets. Without them, none of this evidence would exist. He frowned. You mean the hotel? Yes. Them and the lawyer who notarized my report. They did what your own systems couldn't. They believed evidence over hierarchy. I turned to leave, but the CFO called after me. You're reinstated with full back pay, and there's an offer letter in your inbox. Director of Operations, effective immediately. I didn't answer right away. I just said, send it officially. I'll respond after the audit closes. By noon, the story had spread through the entire building. An all-hands email arrived from the CEO. Effective immediately, Vice President Daniel Knox has been terminated for gross misconduct, pending legal proceedings. A full review of expense management protocols will follow. We commend the integrity of those who assisted in uncovering this breach. There it was, one line that changed everything. I walked to the 14th floor, his floor. His nameplate was already gone. His office door stood open, sterile, emptied overnight by facilities. The glass walls reflected only me. Now, I stepped inside. His chair still spun slightly, like someone had left in a hurry. On the desk sat a photo frame face down. I flipped it over. Him shaking hands with the CEO, smiling that politician's smile. I set it back upright, centered perfectly, and walked out. No speech, no victory grin, just silence. The same silence he'd left me in, half a world away. 2 days later, legal called. We've concluded the preliminary audit. You were right. There's a multi-million-dollar discrepancy. The board has approved restitution. Restitution? You'll receive a settlement bonus for wrongful suspension plus reimbursement for all out-of-pocket expenses, and a discretionary goodwill payment for the distress caused. I almost laughed. Money was fine, but what I really wanted was acknowledgement. I want a written statement clearing my record, I said, signed by the CEO and HR. Done, the lawyer replied. Before hanging up, I added, one more thing. Half of that goodwill payment, I want it wired to the staff fund of the Grand Avia Hotel in Cluj. They helped me when your company didn't. There was a pause, then quietly, consider it arranged. The next morning, I sat in a cafe near the office, the same one where I'd once taken coffee breaks to escape his meetings. Outside, the street was alive with traffic, voices, the smell of espresso and asphalt. For the first time in months, I felt still. My new ID badge lay on the table. Director of Operations. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like equilibrium. I opened my email and saw one last message from an address I didn't recognize. dan.nxprotonmail.com. You think you won? You just got lucky. I typed one line and hit send. Luck is getting stranded and surviving. What happened to you is consequences. Then I deleted the thread and closed the laptop. That evening, I wired the money to the hotel fund. The receipt, printed on thin paper, curling at the edges. I folded it and slipped it into the same folder that had once carried my police report, the one that had started everything. As I left the bank, the sky broke open into soft rain. The city lights blurred like watercolor. I walked without rushing, the way you do when you finally have nowhere to run. I passed the glass tower of my company's headquarters, and in the reflection, for the first time, I didn't see a victim. I saw a man who'd walked through the quiet, outlasted the noise, and rewritten his own ending. Sometimes karma doesn't roar. Sometimes it just signs the check, stamps the apology, and lets you walk away.